How's that with the sound?
Perfect. Nailed it first time.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Alrighty. So
Yeah, I'm keen to talk about whatever. I mean, I do enough of these that we can go any direction you want to go.
all right. Well, that's perfect. So we've got a few people just coming in here, but we'll kick off right now. Okay. So Ron, as guys come on, I'll just mute them, but then they can ask you some questions or via the chat. I think most of them will know the story anyway. But just quickly, so just snapshot, 30 seconds. You were a football player at one stage, weren't you? High school level, or did you get to college?
University, yeah.
University, all right. And then quick transition to strength and conditioning. And then I really liked your story about, was it South Florida, where you were with the HIT program? I love that story about you and the HIT program and the Olympic and the coaching and the way you saw it. And I think one of your mentors could argue both sides better. Can you just elaborate on that quickly?
Yeah, he tore me up. I had this, for those that don't know, the story goes, I had grown up a weightlifter. Had Istvan Dvorak. You're probably familiar with the Dvorak complexes. Yep. Now he lived right down the street from me. So
okay.
Grew up Olympic weightlifting and eventually got to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was a high intensity program. And when you're a young coach, you kind of drank the Kool-Aid early, right? So I drank the Kool-Aid and dove all in on high intensity training and thought, that was the way. I must have been doing it wrong. And we had a coach come in and he was a traditional coach. And here I was with just a little bit of knowledge. And we got into a debate. And the guy, I was struggling a little bit because I just didn't have all the background. And so Mark Hasanovich was the head strength coach, brought us both in, and he just tore this guy up. I mean, just buried him, with research studies and support. And so the guy frustrated left, and I thought, like, we got him, right? We got him. And he's like, nope, sit right back down. And he had me argue all the same points that he just made. And then he turned around and argued all the other points and tore me up as well. So it was a good learning experience for me to know that, don't let myself get caught up in the battle of PhDs.
Yeah. But I think there's another lesson there. And one of the things that you brought up, you said the word wrong. Like, that's how we think in beginners. This is right. Therefore, something different must be wrong. Whereas after a while, and I always talk about, to my interns and my coaches before they go to a conference, don't think in right or wrong. Think, where might I use this? Who might I use this for? So HIT training, perfect in this situation, but in another situation, I'm going to prefer to go there. But that's an evolution that you've got to really struggle to get through because it is so easy to go right and wrong, isn't it?
I think that's especially, 25 years ago, it was almost like a religion. So if you were this, you definitely couldn't be that. But I think with CrossFit and just the evolution of the profession, we've gotten a little bit more tolerant of different lines of thinking, but we do have a tendency to think, what we do is right and what other people does is wrong. And when you think like that, you're going to find yourself. I found myself in China. You set up the weight room, the whole night before, we're about to go in, start the training the next morning, set it up at 10 o'clock. We get in there, the next morning at 6 a.m. and they had taken everything out of the weight room and it was it was just floor, and long story short, they misunderstood me. I told them I wanted bumper plates. They mistook that for, we want all new equipment. And so we had to train the team for a week without any equipment. And so time under tension principles and body weight and tempo and things along those lines, those are things that became really, really valuable really, really quick.
And that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because in that situation, like this is where, and a big theme in these chats has come through is the number of people who've done well, but at some point in their career, they've been hamstrung by something. So coaching in Japan, coaching in China, coaching on a low budget, coaching in a situation with limited time. And then it actually forces you. So when you take your language out, it forces you to be really specific about what you're trying to get across. Or when you're talking through a translator or, low budget. Okay. Let me work out all these progressions on the push-up. Wow, there's thousands of different things I can do. And it's interesting because at the back end of your career, when you think, a lot of young coaches think, oh, when I get to that stage, I won't have to deal with these issues. No, you do. It's for a different reason, but you do.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Ron, I really want to talk about, especially for young coaches here. We've got a situation where, a lot of them getting degrees now. I think that's pretty accepted sort of pathway. And then, especially in Australia, there's these masters that they're doing, and they're coming out of that and big debt and a bunch of other things, but maybe don't have the practical experience. And I'm interested in your take on what is an ideal sort of situation for a young coach to go through? What should they be doing in their first year, their final year? When should you start considering your masters or deeper study, that kind of stuff?
I think it's a good question. I think, at this point now, people, especially here in the U.S., people don't necessarily value the master's degree. They typically value the experience that went with it. Now I think that's different elsewhere, where the education is a high premium because there's a lack of opportunity from a practical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think getting an advanced degree and getting a master's degree specifically in exercise science or something related, if you're going into strength and conditioning, is of value. But I mean, there's so many times that I've learned things after the fact, or I wish I would have had some context to it, so it would have made more sense when I was in university, for sure. So I think for coaches, it's important that becomes it's a collaborative approach to where you're combining that practical experience with the education. And honestly, I would yield to the practical over the academic. First, I think you need to get the practical experience so you can learn to ask the right questions when you are in university.
Yep. And it's interesting because a lot of people, I think some of the best PhDs we're reading now are actually people who have been in the field for a long period of time and then, have better questions to ask because, they're actually asking the questions that they want to find out the answer to. And is it similar with you guys where there are a lot of PhDs now associated with professional teams or high-level teams and with athletes? Is that a similar sort of thing in the US?
No, I think the reason why that's the case around the world is because there isn't as many professional and collegiate jobs. So people continue their education because they can't find jobs. So they graduate oftentimes with a master's degree or a PhD even. And then that's become the standard, almost the barrier of entry to even get in, where it's almost the opposite here, where typically you go and you get your experience, you do your internship, you go on and you get a graduate degree while you're doing a GA position. And then, once you get to a certain place in your career, you go back and get your PhD to answer specific questions, and I would almost argue that a lot of the research that that's being delivered, right now is from people that haven't been in the practical setting, that, it's skewing, a little bit of the direction of the field is taken. And there's a lot of people that are true practitioners that are shaking their head to say, hey, it's not matching up with what I see day to day. And it creates a little bit of mistrust in what's being produced. And so I definitely think, I've made this statement many times, and I think the U.S. is very, very good at the providing resources and the coaching science of strength and conditioning. I think the rest of the world is much better at allowing science to drive training, mostly because their sport coaches are usually coming up with some sort of exercise science related degree as well. Whereas in the U.S., sport coaches are usually just more of an apprenticeship type of mentality where they played the sport at a high level, so they end up becoming a coach. And oftentimes their degrees aren't matching up with that. And I think that's getting closer. I think, coaches around the world are doing a much better job with the coaching science, probably better than the U.S. is doing, allowing science to drive training.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the direction that we need to head. I mean, to your point and what you asked me, I think we really need to start embedding PhDs into our program. In fact, I know you're from Brisbane. One of the most, one of the coolest things that I saw when traveling, early on, Brisbane was one of the first places that I went when I started traveling internationally. Was how they had put a PhD on their staff to research a specific problem as a staff each year, and they had their posters up in their staff room.
Yep.
To me, that's I think that's super important. I think if you're answering a specific question to to high level sport, I think it's very applicable. But I think some of these programs where it's just you're tweaking things to get published, I think it's it is what it is.
You get your PhD, but you haven't really contributed much value, have you?
Right.
And then, so Ron, you in a position now where you are employing people and sort of assessing, and I've read some of your stuff about what you look for, but I'm interested in, you've been to Australia a number of times. You presented at the ASCA conference. If an Aussie, or I suppose this applies to the UK as well, wants to kind of work in the collegiate system, what are some things that they can do here that might accelerate their, or put them at the top of the pile when they apply?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and the challenge becomes is that my last job, even here at Fresno State, which is it's there's Power 5 and there's a Group of 5, and this is a Group of 5 school, so it maybe it's not a lesser level, but it's maybe a lesser. The logo isn't as flashy, I guess, maybe. Even my job that I had open this last time, there were 700 resumes for it.
Okay.
And so, when you're trying to whittle that down, you create your own set of criteria. And my criteria is, are you certified? Get you right or left? Did you play a sport at a high level? Right or left? Do you have your master's degree? Right or left? And then do I know you some way, shape, or form, right or left? And that's kind of how I whittle that down. And that becomes the pile that I'll work from, and that, it gets to around 50 or 100 applicants sometimes. So when so now I think the biggest thing is to try to remove the barriers, so for, coaches that are in the UK or Ireland or Australia or wherever, I get concerned, if I have to worry about the green card process
Yep.
or, all the things that potentially could be issues. And so getting those things answered, I think, is probably number one, and simplifying that and making that easy for people to know, because not everybody has traveled the world. I think especially coaches in the UK, it's hard to kind of, in the US, I mean, you can drive hours and not be even out of the state.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, you drive an hour and you can be in a completely different country.
Yeah.
And, I think that's, the same kind of mentality. There's a lot of coaches that have never even been out of the country before, and that scares them a little bit. So I think using things that make sense, for example, Australia is known for sports science and sports technology. If you really kind of position yourself as that in that way, there's a lot of people that are looking for that solution.
Mm-hmm.
In the US, doesn't mean you get pigeonholed necessarily to just that, but if you can coach and you can do that, that becomes a value to me. But and then I think it's just the sport. I think being sports that maybe Australia or the UK are better than the US puts you potentially at the top of the pile. But if you're an Australian strength coach and you're applying for professional football job here in the US, it's going to be a hard road without getting some sort of experience. Yep. Here in the US.
Would you recommend, if that's your long-term goal, would you recommend saying, hey, early on in my career, before I even start applying for these jobs, heading a NSCA conference or something like that and kind of just working around, getting to meet people like you, other decision makers?
Yeah, what I recommend now is that people do mini internships. what I call mini internships. So instead of doing a whole semester or 6 months, a year, or whatever, see if you can't make a connection and go and visit and be with somebody for a week. In a week, I can get a pretty good idea of what you're all about as a coach, and I'll get to know you. And a lot of times I'll let you stay on my couch, and have dinner every night, and those types of things. So I think there's a lot of people that are willing to help and open their doors, but
there's a business opportunity for you. We're kind of like one of the Mel Siff strength camps.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
$1,000 for the week. They get breakfast with you, dinner with you, and sleep on the couch. Ask you all the questions.
Come on, anytime. I won't even charge.
All right. So, but yeah, because I like that idea of the mini internship. Kind of come in and maybe a week or two here. And okay, so that actually brings me to my next question: is strength and conditioning. We are a young profession, and we've inherited things from other professions. So, for example, interview process. And I think the interview process currently works well for an accountant who just sits over there and accounts and works stuff out. But it's really inadequate for someone who's you're going to be spending, 10, 12, 14-hour days with, under all sorts of intense pressure to base it off a resume, a 45-minute job interview and say, hey, I'm going to employ you for the next 3 years. If you could redesign that, if you could start from the beginning, what would be some of the things that you said, okay, at Fresno, you get to select your team. What would be some of the things that you'd be putting in place?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's a hard question for me to answer, because in 23 years of coaching, I've only hired 2 people that I didn't have work for me in some way, shape, or form, as an intern up through the ranks.
So what set those 2 apart?
I'm sorry?
What set those 2 apart? Those 2?
Both I was trying to fill a need, either like a position, working with a specific position, and I just didn't have somebody in line, or the other one was a basketball strength coach that, I just didn't have anybody that really had strong basketball experience. Mm-hmm. One worked out and one didn't. One of them was one of 2 people that I fired, in my career. So it's not a good batting average. I think when we're hiring interns and bringing them in, we go through multiple stages. Stage 1 is a member of my staff calls them. Their job is to get them excited and to get to learn about their character. And so they're asking a million questions about their character to see if they can get along. They're going to feel like they're going to get along with our staff. A second interview is set up. The second interview is the same thing, get them excited, but then turn around and assess their content knowledge. Are they able to coach on our level? From there, they're brought in, and that's usually one of 4 people, and it's a 2-day interview, and they go through a number of things. They work out with us as a staff. They get up on the board in front of us as a staff.
And so all 4 are at the same time, so they know they got.
No, different times. We introduce them to administrators, coaches, and athletes, and we're evaluating those. Sometimes people think those are just bump-ins, but they're intentional.
Yep.
And then the biggest thing is I'll throw situations out throughout those 2 days where I'll send the whole staff out to move weights from one end of the weight room to the other, and make them sit there and have them sit in my office and tell them that I'll be right back, and see if they'll actually go out and help or not.
Okay.
Or I'll throw different scenarios at them, and just to see how they're going to react. Because I think, to me, if you're at that level, we bring you in. You've been assessed on character, and you've been assessed on knowledge, and you've passed the background checks that we would make. At that point, it's about fit. And if I'm going to spend more time with you than I spend with my wife, then I better like you.
100%. Okay, so that's interesting. I like that. Have you considered bringing them all in at the same time?
We have. I think there's some legal things that kind of prevent that here in the U.S. But but I would love a Hunger Games type of approach. I mean, essentially what our internship is, to be honest with you. What we do is we bring in 12 interns in the summer, and then we keep the best 2 for the fall and spring. And then those people usually end up going off and getting other jobs because we help them. We intentionally help them. And then those are the first people that I bring back. So they would have gone through like a Hunger Games type of experience to see who's the cream of the crop, and then they're encouraged and supported to go elsewhere, and then we bring them back.
Yep. So they get there some experience and development, come back with some new ideas, or
exactly.
That's awesome. It is an interesting one because again, this is a theme of with my coaches, and bearing in mind I've got really young coaches and my interns who are undergrads. Is I keep emphasizing this, and this is a theme that's come through with you, is almost everything's a job interview in such a small competitive environment where within 1 or 2 phone calls, you can reach everyone's reference or know someone who knows someone. You just have to be, you can't be a dick. You can't not put the best foot forward, because, whatever you're coaching, just give it the best, because there'll be someone there judging or someone there looking to eliminate you.
It's too small of a profession, one, and you want to surround yourself with people that make the big time where they're at and elevate any situation. And you can find those people pretty quick if you spend any amount of time with them.
Yeah. Now, just changing tack slightly, have you changed your advice that you've given to your interns and your young coaches over the years, where at one stage of your career you thought, hey, you know what, young coaches should do this, and then now you kind of think, wait a second, I'm going to go back on that?
Yeah, I think, where I'm really focused now, and I've shifted, I wrote the book CEO Strength Coach, and in that book I talk about being you got to be a success, you have to be a great technician, you have to be a great manager, and you have to be a great entrepreneur.
Yep.
And early on in my career, it was really focused on the technician part, being just the best coach that you can be, and knowing all the sets and reps and progressions and regressions and all that. Managing is really where the rubber meets the road, and learning how to manage time, people, and resources. But now, later in my career here, and where I didn't kind of focus on those interns, focusing on this early, now I do, is really that individual branding element of, finding your niche, finding something that you can build some authority around as a young coach that can help you stand out in a crowded marketplace.
Yep. That's interesting, because it's been the same with me, as we've spent, especially probably in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot more time talking about business, positioning, niching, a whole bunch of things, which I think is almost like an evolution of my career. In the beginning, I didn't think that stuff was important. Just put me in the weight room. That's where I'm comfortable. I don't care about anything else. That's it. And so my mentorship and my internship reflected that. And then especially in the last 8 years being in the private sector, I've just seen how valuable it is. And, Ron, you'd probably know this, but in Australia, a lot of sport is government funding. And with Corona shutdowns and bailouts and all this kind of stuff, my assumption is going to be that funding is not going to be there anymore.
I agree.
And so you're going to have to work in a situation where you've got input or incomes from different sources, and you're going to have to make that work. And there'll be some, you're going to have to do things that you didn't think you wanted to. But that's just the fact of the matter. Now, just sort of on a similar line there, anything in terms of a paradigm that you are currently exploring, whether it's on the weight room floor or to do with business or marketing, or is there anything that you kind of think, hey, I don't know much about this, but I just find it fascinating?
I mean, where most of my focus is right now is I'm finishing up my 3rd book right now.
Okay.
That's
any insight there?
I'm sorry?
Any insights on that? What's the book?
Yeah, it's the book's going to be called Overtime. It's exactly this concept of creating multiple streams of income around your individual brand, but in a way that where most entrepreneurial books are focused on helping you pivot to a different aspect. This is really designed to create stability amongst an unstable world.
Yep.
And create those streams of income so you can coach and do what you love to do, and you're not giving up on all this hard work that you've put in to continue to, to go. I think a lot of people get out of coaching because exactly what you're talking about. There's government shutdowns, or there's funding issues, or whatever. So a lot of my internal, I'm starting a new podcast that's, I was going to launch, honestly, I was going to launch this on Monday. But I pushed it to September just because I didn't want the perception to be that I'm trying to make money or
capitalize
off of coronavirus, whatever. It's a project that
but
I've been
you're gonna have your naysayers anyway, so you should just do it. Just pull the trigger.
Yeah, this one's a little bit challenging because, whereas everything I've done has been strength and conditioning related, this is me more talking, true business and true, branding. And I just think that the perception could be that I'm not working, striving to get these guys back. I'm working on the side stuff.
Yep. Gotcha.
Even though it's been the book, I'm thinking I'm on my 13th month of working on the book, and the podcast I've shot 20 something episodes. It's just sitting there. But
so is that you interviewing others or you just talking?
Yeah, the podcast is going to be really three types of guests. It's coaches that have done that, the case studies that have created other streams of income. It's experts that are that I've brought on to teach you YouTube or podcasting or whatever. And then it's guests that are going to be that have created and found unique ways to save money, and not have money go out. So
okay. Yep.
It's I'm excited about it. I think it's timely. I wish I would have been done 6 months ago. Would have been really, really good. But it's something that, CEO Strength Coach really started me down that path of really, because out of all the questions I got from that book, most of them centered around how do I create a podcast? How do I write a book? How do I, create a brand, speak, and all those types of things that I do. And that's, I think it's going to be a really valuable tool for people.
I think so too. I'm just looking. It's funny. I've just started exploring into the corporate sector, and so many of our things that we do as strength and conditioning coaches, periodization as an example, start at the end, like where do you want to finish, and work backwards. So just 2 weeks ago, I presented to the Tax Institute. Me, a strength and conditioning coach, who 8 years ago, just wanted to be employed and be in a business room. I was talking to these tax lawyers and accountants.
Yep.
But what it was is me taking off my own blinkers and saying, hey, I've got these skills that can help you outside of this very, very specific domain. And Ron, by the way, it pays pretty well too. So I think the more we can have these discussions, and instead of 700 applicants applying for an internship position, you start to see, hey, there's a way broader.
I think that's really the thing that most. I think you go through that natural evolution. We all get in the business because we like lifting weights, we like sport, we get into that, and we in that technical stage, everything that we talk about, think about is strength and conditioning. But what we really quickly learn and we become a business owner or a head strength coach is that it's about the people, it's about the resources, it's about time management and those types of things. And you got to become great at that. And so you kind of start expanding your knowledge base because you didn't learn that in kinesiology class. And then from there, to stay current, you have to be entrepreneurial minded. You have to be thinking outside the box. You got to be continuing sharpening your sword, and that kind of gets you down that path, along with just the volatility of the profession. And so what you're saying about going to meeting with tag, if we're going to survive as a profession, that we all have a lot of different jobs to become strength coaches. Like I parked cars, I was a personal trainer, I was, whatever. Then my profession, so that was my jobs that I did. My profession is a strength and conditioning coach, but that can be taken from me. But my vocation is helping people become the best version of themselves. And when you think of it like that, nobody can ever really take that away from you.
100%.
And so that tax accountant you can help that person become the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And those skills are really what separates the great strength coaches from the ones that can just count to 10 and flex in the mirror.
All right. I want to open it up. If anyone's got a question, Miku, Charles, John, Blair, Jess, I saw a whole bunch of names signing up there. If you've got a question for Ron, fire away. Either use the chat option or ask, because Ron does have to go in about 4 minutes. He's got another meeting to go to. So I'll just open it up to the floor. If you've got a question, I've got a few more that I'd love to ask, but opening up to you guys. If there's nothing there, just take your mic off mute. Oh, Charles, go fire away, Charles.
Cheers, Grant. Ron, you traveled a lot with, obviously, play. Was there things that you saw that different countries did better than others that you have taken back to your work at Fresno now? And why do you think that these different countries have these different themes in how they work when ultimately we're all trying to work towards the same goal?
Yeah, great. I appreciate the question, Charles. I think it would be hard for me to say one country did something better than the other country. I think just, kind of conventional, kind of accepted knowledge is that Australia is very, very good with technology and integrating technology. I think the UK is very, very good with systems and processes and being very kind of almost rigid in that kind of implementation. And then I think the US is very good at the coaching skills, like the coaching science part of things. But what I try to do is I tried to seek out people like David Joyce and Lachlan Wilmot and people that have come from the strength of Australia, but have also learned and benefited from other parts of the world to be able to integrate those things. And same thing in the UK with like Duncan French and coaches like that, where they've blended what their strength was with elevating where they were weak. I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. And we've got a question here. Thumbs up from Charles. We've got a question from John. In the collegiate system, is it best to train males and females separately or combined in the weights room?
At Fresno State, we have 21 sports. So I tell them that we have 21 sports and one team. We're all Fresno State. We all put that on our jersey. And so I actually enjoy it when the other sports train with each other, because I think it's good for them to see people working just as hard in different sports. And that's probably one of, Charles, going back to your question, it's probably one of the things that I took most away from, traveling, the world was like, I'd never in a million years would have thought that there would have been a whole stadium for cricket, before I traveled to Melbourne, or sports like rowing, and when I worked with rowing in China and places like that. I mean, like to be on the boat and go out and do a 2,000-meter row and to feel how that feels, like, a greater appreciation. And I think the more we can surround ourselves with athletes doing that, the better. Grant, I hate to do this, but I do got to jump off to this meeting. If you guys would, I would love to answer your questions, every single person. Go to @McKeefery on Instagram and ask me there, and I promise you I'll get back to you.
Perfect. All right, cool. Awesome, Ron. Thanks very much. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one. See you.